In this lecture, we're going to tackle two things. First, we're going to make the options we created in this section work as intended. The second task is to use the media uploader to set the featured image for a recipe. The first option we have is whether it's required for users to log in to rate a recipe. In the rate recipe function, I'm going to grab the ROPTS option. Then I'm going to check for two things. I'm going to check if the user is not logged in using the isUserLoggedIn function, and then I'm going to compare the rating long required option to 2. If both statements return true, then we will want to kill the script because the user is indeed required to log in to rate a recipe. I'll have to move the output variable above so that this will work. Next, I'm going to update the shortcode function. If the user is not logged in and we require the user to be logged in to create a recipe, then we'll display a message to them. Once again, grab the ROPTS option and make the same conditional statement check again. Make sure to update the conditional to use the recipe submission login required instead. If both statements return true, I'm going to output the message, "You must be logged in to submit a recipe." Let's test this out really quick. Log out and then visit the Submit Recipe page. Previously, I saved my option to require users to log in to submit a recipe. Therefore, I should see this message telling me I need to be logged in. Now I want you to log in and try seeing if you can view the form again. If you can, then that's great. Now that we've made the two options work, let's move on to the next problem. I want users to be able to upload an image and set a featured image. There are two ways we can go about accomplishing this. We can create an upload button and then process that upload, or we can just use the uploader WordPress provides for us already. Try creating a new recipe. On the sidebar, we have the option of setting a featured image. Click the button. This modal will pop up displaying all the images you previously uploaded. You even have the option of uploading a new one. This is what's called the media uploader. We can use this in our plugins and themes. Let's learn how to do so. First, we need to enqueue the files that will take care of styling and managing the modal. Inside the front enqueue file, we're going to use a special function called WP enqueue media. This will enqueue all files related to the media uploader. Now we can use the media uploader in our page. Open the Recipe Creator shortcode template. Right before the Submit button, I'm going to paste in some HTML. Nothing too special about this HTML. Pause the video if you need to have what I have. Here's what's going on in the HTML. First, we have this label with a link. We will make it so that if the user clicks this link, then the media uploader will pop up. Then we have an image tag which will allow the user to preview their selection. The most important tag is the hidden input field. This will be sent to the process function, and it's what WordPress needs in order to know what image the user selected. All you need to send is the ID of the image. Let's make this part of the form functional. Open the main.js file. This is the same file with the login and authentication JS code. Right above the submit code, we'll add the code to make the media uploader work. Create a variable named featured frame. This variable will be assigned to the value returned by the wp.media method. This method was loaded by WordPress when you enqueued the required files. To learn more about this method, I provide a link in the resource section of this lecture. Here you'll find a long example on how to use this. You can click this link for more information about the WP object. Here you'll find information about the JavaScript utilities WordPress has to offer. Let's go back to our file. This method will return a media object which you can use later to open the media uploader. This method has one parameter which is an object of properties you can set. The first is the title. I'm going to set this to select or upload media. The second property is the button property. This property expects another object of properties which you can set. Inside this object, I'm going to set the text property to use this media. The last property I want to set is the multiple property, which will be set to false. This will make it so that users can only select one image instead of multiple images. We only have one featured image, so we will only want one selected image. This code will initialize the media uploader, but it will not display it. We only want the media uploader to display if the user clicks on the upload link. To do this, we'll listen for a click using the jQuery_on method. The ID of the button is recipe-img-upload-btn. As usual, we will prevent the normal behavior from happening. To open the media uploader, you simply need to call the open method. This method only becomes available after you initialize the media uploader, which is what we did above. The very last thing we want to do is update the preview and input field when the user selects an image. The featured frame object provides a few events. One of these events is the select event that will be triggered when a user selects an image. We'll use the on method and listen for this event. Inside the function, we're going to create a variable called attachment. This variable's value will be set to an object returned by a chain of methods. Hopefully you'll be able to follow along because we have to use a number of methods to accomplish this. So first up is the featured frame object. We're going to get the current state of the media uploader by calling the state method. Then we have to use the get method to retrieve a value from the current state. The value we want to get is the selection property. This will return the currently selected item in the media uploader. Then we're going to call the first method, which will return the first item in the array returned. Even though we have multiple set to false, the media uploader will still return an array of selected objects. Finally, the value returned will be a string. Therefore, we need to convert it into an object. We'll use the method toJSON to accomplish this. That was a lot, but hopefully you get the gist of it. The attachment will now be an object with properties about the image selected. We only care about two properties. I'm going to set the source attribute of the recipe-img-preview tag to the attachment.url property. This is the full HTTP URL to the full-sized image. Next, I want to set the value of the rInputImageID input to the attachment.id property. This is the ID in the database, and it's the ID that we'll need to assign the image to this post. The very last step is to send it when the form is submitted. I'm going to create a new property called attachment ID and set its value to the input field like so. Our JavaScript file is now complete. The next step is to process it through PHP. Open the submit-user-recipe.php file. This is the file we made to process new recipes on the front end. Right before we kill the script, create a new conditional statement that will check if the attachment ID post key is set and if it isn't empty. Then, we need to include the wp-admin/includes/image.php file. Processing images is not done on every request, so it's unnecessary for WordPress to automatically load this file. Since that is the case, we need to load it ourselves. By loading this file, we now have access to a function called setPostThumbnail. This function will assign the image to the post. All it requires is the post ID and then the attachment ID itself. I'm going to wrap the ID of the attachment with the absInt function just for good security measure. This would be a good time to talk about data validation. We've been using many functions to sanitize our data, but we haven't explored all of them yet. In the resources section of this lecture, I provide a link to the data validation codex page. This page contains a list of all the functions provided by WordPress that you can use to sanitize data. Feel free to bookmark it as it's quite useful to have when you want to sanitize data. That's about it. Let's test this out and see if it works. I want you to create a new recipe and fill in all these fields. When you select an image, you should be able to see the preview right under the label. Submit your recipe and you should see a success message. Just to confirm if everything worked, let's go to the admin dashboard and view the list of recipe posts. You should be able to see our brand new recipe created along with the featured image assigned to it.